The dusty street of the frontier town bustled with wagons, horses, and weary travelers. But no one noticed the barefoot orphan girl standing alone. Her small figure looked lost against the backdrop of shops and saloons, swallowed by the noise and dust of the day. She clutched a torn shawl around her thin shoulders, her eyes following families who hurried by. Every time she gathered the courage to step forward, to reach out with a trembling hand, she was brushed aside with cold glances. It was as though her very existence was invisible to the world, unwanted and forgotten. She tried knocking on doors. One by one, she stood at the thresholds of houses filled with laughter and warmth. The first door opened, but before she could even speak, the woman inside shook her head and closed it quickly. The second door lingered longer, an old man glaring down at her before muttering, "Ain't got nothing for you," and shutting her out. At every door, the answer was the same: rejection. No one wanted her. No one would give her a chance. Her small, tired hands shook as she clutched her shawl tighter, each refusal pressing her lower into despair. By the time dusk painted the sky in streaks of red and gold, her feet were raw from walking the rough, dusty roads. She found herself near the livery stable, where the smell of hay and horses filled the air. The street had grown quieter, the sounds of laughter and piano music spilling only from the saloon at the far end. She sat down, her back against the wooden wall of the stable, her knees drawn to her chest. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, sharper now than the pain in her feet. Her cheeks were streaked with dirt and tears, and she felt smaller than ever before. The shadows lengthened, stretching across the ground as the last light dipped behind the hills. Alone in that growing darkness, she whispered into the folds of her shawl. She didn't know if it was a prayer, or just the voice of a child aching to be heard. Despair was settling deep into her bones, heavy and merciless. For a moment, she thought she would close her eyes and never wake again. Then the sound of boots crunched softly on the gravel. She froze, uncertain whether to run or hide, but exhaustion pinned her to the ground. A figure paused near her. He wasn't dressed in fine clothes like the townsfolk who had turned her away. His shirt was worn, sleeves rolled, his hat pulled low from years of sun. The poor rancher stood in the fading light, looking down at her with eyes that seemed tired yet kind. He had nothing to spare. His own boots were patched, his coat mended more than once. Yet something in the sight of the shivering girl stopped him. His voice broke the silence, not harsh or commanding, but soft, lined with hardship and gentleness all at once. You got no family, child? He asked quietly, crouching down so his face wasn't far from hers. She hesitated, searching his face for cruelty or pity, but saw only honesty in his weathered features. Slowly, she shook her head, strands of hair falling across her pale cheeks. Her throat tightened too much to form words, so she simply pressed her lips together and looked away. The man stayed silent for a moment, as though weighing something far heavier than silver or gold. Then he let out a breath, the kind that came from deep inside. He whispered, almost to himself at first, "Then you do now." The girl's eyes flickered back to his, uncertain she had heard him right. But the rancher didn't take the words back. He took off his hat, scratching at his messy hair, then gently extended his hand toward her. "Come on, ain't much I got, but what I have, I reckon I can share." His voice trembled slightly, but there was no hesitation in his eyes. She blinked, still caught between fear and hope, before slowly placing her small hand in his. His grip was steady, grounding her like roots in the soil. Together, they walked through the quiet street, past windows glowing warm with lamplight. Some townsfolk peeked out and whispered, surprised to see the poor rancher with the little orphan. But he ignored them all, his stride unshaken. The girl stumbled beside him, her body still weak. Yet something inside her felt different now, lighter, as though a door had opened in a world that had been nothing but walls. She didn't know where he was leading her, or what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she wasn't walking alone. When they reached the edge of town, the sky above them had turned deep indigo, scattered with stars. The road stretched toward open land, where hills and prairies seemed endless. The girl's heart pounded with a mix of fear and wonder. The rancher glanced down at her, his rough features softened by the starlight. "You'll be all right," he said, his words simple, but carrying a promise stronger than any she had ever known. In that moment, the girl knew that life had changed, not with gold or grand gestures, but with a single act of kindness that gave her something she never thought she'd have: belonging. He took her to his small ranch at the far edge of town, where the land met the wild prairie and the wind sang through the tall grass. The fences were weather-beaten, the barn sagged a little, and the cabin carried the scent of wood smoke and hay. Yet to the orphan girl, it was a castle, brighter than anything she had ever known. When the rancher placed a warm bowl of stew before her, her tiny hands trembled. For the first time, she was not an unwanted burden. She was seen as someone's daughter, someone worth keeping safe. Days slipped into weeks, and the cabin filled with new rhythms of life. The girl rose with the dawn, her bare feet padding across wooden floors to help gather water or feed the chickens. The rancher taught her to ride a horse, his voice steady as he guided her trembling hands on the reins. At first she was afraid, but as the wind rushed past her face, laughter spilled out bright and free. For the first time, her laughter did not echo alone. It was answered by the proud chuckle of a man who had given her his name. She learned to care for the cattle, brushing their coats until they gleamed beneath the prairie sun. She mended fences with clumsy but determined hands, her face streaked with dirt and her heart filled with pride at every nail driven in. The rancher watched quietly, never scolding her mistakes but guiding her with patience. In the evenings, they would share simple meals, stories, and quiet silences broken only by the crackling fire. It was in those silences she felt it most that she was no longer invisible. She belonged to someone who wanted her there. The townsfolk began to notice. At first, their eyes were skeptical. What business did a poor rancher have, taking in an orphan girl when he struggled to keep food on the table? But as seasons passed, whispers changed to respect. Each time someone asked the girl where she belonged, the rancher would lift his chin and answer with unwavering pride, "She carries my name." Those words carried more weight than gold. They were her shield, her crown, her proof that she was no longer just a nameless child left behind. She had a place, a family, and a future. Through harsh winters, they faced storms that rattled the cabin walls and froze the land solid. Through scorching summers, they worked beneath a relentless sun, sweat streaking their brows. The girl never shrank back, never begged for escape. She faced each hardship with him, her small hands doing what they could, her laughter lightening his burdens. And when exhaustion pulled at his shoulders, she would bring him water, a blanket, or simply a smile that reminded him why he had chosen to open his door to her. In truth, she had given him just as much as he had given her. She grew taller, her voice steadier, her eyes brighter with each passing year. Books she once struggled to read by lamplight soon filled her with stories and dreams. She learned not only the ways of the ranch but the lessons of resilience and kindness her guardian quietly instilled. Their bond deepened until it was unbreakable, forged not by blood but by choice. To the girl, he was not just a poor rancher, was her father, and to him, she was more than an orphan, she was his greatest blessing. Together, they carved out a life richer than either imagined. Sometimes, she remembered the nights of hunger, the cold doors slammed in her face, the loneliness that had once been her shadow. Those memories no longer crushed her, they fueled her gratitude. She vowed to never let another child feel what she once felt. And as she grew, she carried that vow in every act of kindness. In every moment, she chose to share her strength. The poorest man had given her the richest gift, and she in turn gave that gift forward, filling their home with warmth and love the world had once denied her. On the anniversary of the night he found her, they returned to town together. She was no longer a ragged child in torn shawl and bare feet. She was tall, strong, carrying his last name with pride. The same streets that once echoed with rejection now rang differently. The shopkeepers nodded, children waved, and townsfolk who once turned her away now looked with respect. She held the rancher's hand, her heart swelling. "Thank you for choosing me," she whispered softly. His eyes glistened, his voice steady. "No, child, thank you for choosing me." For in truth, they had saved each other. Years later, the girl now, a young woman, stood at the ranch gate, watching the prairie winds ripple like an endless sea. She knew her story could have ended differently, another orphan forgotten, another heartbroken. But instead, a man who had little offered everything. His name, his home, his love. That choice changed not just her life, but his as well. For, in giving her a family, he had found purpose, companionship, and joy greater than gold. Together, they had written a story not carved in wealth or stone, but in laughter, sacrifice, and the unshakable strength of chosen family. As she grew into adulthood, she carried his lessons into every corner of her life. Hard work, humility, loyalty, and compassion became her guiding stars. The ranch, once fragile against storms, flourished beneath their shared effort. Neighbors came not only to trade, but to sit at their table, warmed by the bond they had built. And when younger children wandered near, the girl who had once been unwanted welcomed them with open arms, determined to pass forward the love she had been given. She was proof that kindness could rewrite the story of a life. One evening, beneath a sky burning orange with sunset, the rancher rested on the porch, his hands rough, his hair silvered by time. Beside him sat the girl he had once found trembling in the dust now, a woman strong, graceful, her laughter ringing across the fields. He looked at her and saw not just the child he had saved, but the daughter who had saved him in return. They sat in silence, the kind that needed no words. In that silence lay the truth. Family is not born, it is chosen. And theirs was a choice that had changed everything. And so their story became a quiet legend in the town. People spoke of the poor rancher who gave his name to an orphan girl, and how that gift grew into something greater than riches. The girl, once invisible, had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that love can bloom in the most unlikely places. Their cabin still smelled of wood smoke and hay. their days still filled with labor, but their hearts carried a wealth no storm could take away. Because sometimes the poorest man gives the richest gift to family and, in that gift, 2 lost souls found forever.